Well, good morning, everybody. It's Saturday, which means it's Rotary Day. So we got a lot of people that are out there today, either doing service projects or attending trainings. And this is a really important training, our board training. And part of why that's super important is our boards are the people that really guide the direction of our clubs. So we appreciate you guys joining us this morning. So right off the bat, wanted to turn it over to DG Sandy for a few words.
Mahalo, Benson, and good morning, everybody. Bright and early on a Saturday morning. It's great to see you here.
Hello, Sandy. Well, you look so lovely today.
Oh my gosh.
Ralph, I know you're in Washington, D.C. You got to show your face. Show your face. Start your video, Ralph.
I can't do that.
Oh, good morning, you folks. This is going to be a fun day today, Benson. I can tell that already, right?
Yeah.
But we're so glad you're here. It's the beginning of our 4-part series on board trainings. And you know, when Naomi and Benson started this out last year, it was really successful. And it's a great way to help prepare this year's boards as well as future board members who might be joining your leadership team in the future. They'll be covering a lot of important topics, and I am ecstatic to know that today one of your guest speakers is none other than Nancy Pace, Dr. Nancy Pace, and she's from the Rotary Club of Honolulu. I guarantee you will enjoy her. This woman is a dynamo, and she's been so actively engaged in projects around the world globally. She's just really an amazing Rotarian. And then you also get a chance to hear from none other than our past district governor, Dale Green, once again. And he'll talk about the fiduciary as well as the legal responsibility. So really good topics to cover. And I hope that you will find these really enjoyable for you, but you know, also for your prospective board members as well. It kind of takes the fear away from, you know, being a part of the leadership team. So go for it and have a good time. And oh my gosh, Past District Governor Dell wore a jacket again. It makes me feel so underdressed when I come to these meetings. But have a great day, folks. And thanks again for coming. Enjoy. Thanks, Benson.
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. So just a disclaimer, I almost can guarantee you that, you know, Dell's got the jacket, but he's still got the shorts on underneath. So no problem. Busted. Yeah, later on in the meeting, we'll have Dell stand up so we can verify that. Okay, so first thing that I'm going to do right off the bat, share screen. We said when we sent the invitation email out, we wanted to kind of go over roles and responsibilities. Now, I'm going to do that in about 1 minute because there's lots of roles and responsibilities. We could do a 2-hour meeting on that. But for our purposes here in District 5000, there's only really 3 that I want to emphasize to you guys right now. So I'm going to share screen. I hope everybody can see that. Can everybody see that? Okay, let me go to slideshow and start from the beginning here. Okay. Excuse me. Also, okay, so here's thing number 1, right? And all of you guys are either parts of a board, you're going to be on a board, you're managing the board. First thing, meet regularly. All right, there's some boards that hardly meet a couple times a year, and it really sort of depends on the president and how the president wants to do it. But it's also really dictated in the bylaws, and I'm going to talk about that next. So you have to meet regularly. Once a month is great. You know, more than that, if things come up, you have to meet regularly. The second thing is that you have to know your club bylaws. So one of the great things that happened to me when I was president-elect for my club, our president that year was Brenda Ho, who's the CEO of a company. And Brenda said, do you know the bylaws? I said, not really. She said, I want you to read them because I don't think that our club has ever really talked about the bylaws or really incorporated the bylaws in what we do as a board. So I want you to go through them, and everything that is not consistent in the bylaws to the way in which we're doing it in the club, We need to be more consistent in our operations with whatever the bylaws are saying. So in our club, I'm not sure they had looked at them in like 50 years. So we updated them to be more current. So part of your responsibility on the board is to know the bylaws. And the last thing, really quickly, is to facilitate the strategic plan. Is the keeper of the strategic plan, right? So every March we go through this our Vibrant Clubs training with every club, and part of that training is to develop a strategic plan for the coming year. And so the responsibility then after that plan is done, because as you guys know, lots of you have been parts of organizations that put together a strategic plan. They write the plan and put it in a drawer, and then it sits there for a year. Rotary, we have the strategic plan. It's a dynamic document. The board then takes that plan, and their job basically is to coordinate, facilitate, monitor the completion of that plan over the coming year. So that is it in a nutshell. So pretty simple to understand. So if you can remember those three things as we're kind of going forward today, there's going to be a lot of really great information. And so we hope that everybody's going to get a lot out of it. And what the object of it is to get more active and engaging board people, because what we find is that if you have an active and engaging board, then you have an active and engaging club. Okay, so with that, I'll turn it over to my cohort today, Naomi Masuno, who will introduce our next presenter. Go ahead, Naomi.
Thank you. And thanks, Sandy, for the intro for Nancy Pace. But I'd like to add to that Nancy has been a Rotarian since 2002. For the Honolulu Club, she was a club president, she now, I think she's retired now. She was the board chair for the Salvation Army, but she's served on many community organizations besides the Salvation Army. She was with the Boys and Girls Club, American Cancer Society, and she is really a person who sees a need and takes action. She spent her life working to empower girls to reach their potential. She's helped in medical clinics around the world, in Kenya, Ethiopia, Thailand, Bangkok. She was instrumental in building a school, a middle school in Cambodia a few years ago. So without further delay, here's Nancy, who will talk about effective clubs and effective boards and how to have an effective board.
Thanks, Naomi. That was, did I pay you enough to say that? That was perfect. No, anyway, I'm so happy to see everybody. And Naomi is going to be sharing a screen. I'm going to be talking about taking your Rotary Club board from good to great. And truly, your club will succeed if you have a wonderful, engaged board. There's no doubt about that. And I currently chair 2 international boards and chaired a number of organizations here. And what I found is that if you take the time to really develop your board, your organization will absolutely thrive. So first slide, please. So your practical tips, nominating, and this is where it all starts. People think that nominating may not be very important, but it is, to get the right people in the right seats and look ahead at future leaders. One of the things that I do in organizations that I'm involved in is I start looking for the next generation of leaders. And I mean, not perhaps Gen X or Gen Y, but I start looking at those as well. But I'm looking at those who will be filling the seats in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. And I start talking to them. And I say, would you ever consider being president of this organization? I'm happy to mentor you in your leadership journey. But we really need, as leaders of as leaders of Rotary in Hawaii and around the world, we really need to be looking far beyond ourselves and start talking to people who have leadership capacity. This is really key. Don't just select someone just because you need to fill a seat on the board. And I have seen this over and over. We don't have a treasurer, so I need to fill the seat. Well, they fill the seat and guess what? The person never comes. And now you're really stuck. So really, I would wait to fill any seat until you have the right person in that job. Job descriptions for all boards that I sit on. I have job descriptions for each committee chair, specifically what they're to do, so they're very clear about their roles. And there are legal obligations of nonprofit boards. I do not think we stress these enough. I know Dell will be going into those, but they're, and by the way, we're a 501c4. I mean, Rotary is our 501c4s. They're membership organizations. Any foundations would be 501c3s. So you have a duty of care, loyalty, and obedience. And I think Dell will, as I said, will be going into those, so I don't want to steal his thunder. But what you do need to know is really important. You are running a 501c4, and you could lose that that capacity to have that 501c4. So you really have to pay attention to that. I think we heard a little bit about strategic planning and strategic direction. Critical. When I was president of our club, I had a board retreat every year because I was president 2.5 years. So I got to have 3 board retreats. And they actually were in March, and they were a full day. And what that enabled us to do was some team building among the board members, cohesiveness, direction, board norms, etc. So they were really clear about all their jobs, their responsibilities, etc. And we came forward as a team. And I think that's what's really important in Rotary. Sometimes we're fractionated and, okay, you're doing this and you're doing that and you're doing that. But how can we all work together to create the best possible outcome for that year? I also met with each board member personally to discuss their role and the strategic direction. And I never, ever, ever asked someone to do something that I would not be doing myself. So I certainly would delegate, and I follow up, but they all knew that I was willing to do any job that I gave them to do as well. And that's really important, because you're not sitting as a king or queen on your throne telling people what to do. That never works. Next slide. I really think this is important and something that I do in all the boards that I'm working with now. I commit to ongoing board performance every single week. I mean, every single month when we're having a board meeting, we will have some sort of training, whether it's on governance, Robert's Rules of Order, fundraising, nonprofit budgeting. But one of the reasons people sit on boards is to learn. And once you learn, you can be a more effective board member. Apologies. Can you hear me? Okay. We've asked them not to do that, but somehow they continue to do that. Meaningful meetings. I always like at the very beginning of the Rotary year or any year to define the norms of behavior. So what do the board members believe? Not what I believe are going to be the norms of behavior for the board, but what do they believe? Because if I just tell them what they are, they're not going to pay any attention to it. I want them to own it. I also say, I don't know how many of you are using board agendas. There's some very, very good board agendas, and I'm happy to share any of those with you. And please do, sorry, don't leave. Send them out in advance of the meeting. So I would say a minimum of 3 to 4 days prior to a meeting. A week is better. These are also really key to have on your agenda: who will be attending the meeting, who's been excused. And that's really good to have in your files, particularly if any questions come up about any decisions that have been made. Also, I put those in the minutes as to who has attended the meetings and who has been excused. Start on time, end on time. You know, I don't know whether it's COVID or what, but I've been seeing we've been moving, 5 minutes late, 5 minutes early. But that really is a professional way to run a board, is to really start exactly on time and end on time. If it's an hour and a half, it's an hour and a half. And this is critical. What I've seen in boards is we have a few people who will speak all the time. This goes back again to norms of behavior. everyone speaks, everyone can ask questions. And if you see, as the facilitator of the group, or the president-elect, depending on who's running that meeting, if you are seeing that some people are not speaking, please do encourage them to speak. And in some cases, you may have to go into some small group discussions in board meetings just to get some of the people who are non-extroverts to come out and speak. So there are ways to facilitate that and to get the information out of people. But it's really important that everyone around the table is speaking. Make them fun and motivational. There are really only three things that motivate people. One is money, two is recognition, and three is their own personal achievement in something. So when you know your board members really well, you know what motivates them. And as a board chair or someone who's running a meeting, you can motivate people. For example, if it's the board member of the month or something, you can get in and they're motivated by money, give them a $5 gift card or $10 gift card to Starbucks or something. If they're motivated by recognition, you could, recognize them in front of the club. Just make them fun. I do a lot of board activities in my meeting. We do team building, usually start with something that's really fun, because you're mentoring, you're demonstrating the way to run a meeting and to make a meeting enjoyable. Okay, just looking at my time. Next slide, please. This is something that I rarely see, and I do this at least once a year, if not twice a year. Evaluate your own board performance, and you can do this in a variety of ways. I use multiple instruments to do this. And basically what you're looking for is not only are they coming to meetings, making a donation to the organization, being active in meetings, being active on their committee as well, but how good are they at going out and maybe getting new members? So you can put a lot of different questions in a board performance tool, but what it does is it keeps people on track. It keeps people accountable for what they're supposed to be doing and what they've agreed to at the beginning of the year. And one of the things I use very effectively is I use a board commitment statement for boards that I'm on, and that they will sign that board commitment statement as to what do you commit to do this year. Number one, attend 90% of the meetings, whatever you want to put down for that. Attend 90% of the meetings, participate on a committee and or chair a committee, and make a financial contribution to Rotary. And basically what happens is they will sign this. And then at the mid-year, if you're going to do a mid-year board performance and you're not using just a regular instrument such as a handout, a questionnaire, I would meet with the board members and say, okay, look, I just want to go over this with you. You haven't been to any committee meetings or board meetings. Is there something that's challenging you or causing you not to be able to come to board meetings? Because that really gets them back on track before the end of the year. So it's something that really works for both sides. It will work for you as the president or president-elect. It will also work for the board member who may not be able to come because the time is wrong for them. So I think that conversation and keeping an open door between the two of you is really, really important. Again, I think when you meet with board members, you ask them what they like to do. You get to know them. There's nothing worse than someone who's incredibly artistic and would be fabulous at creating amazing meetings for Rotary, and you put them in the finance committee. I mean, that just doesn't work. So I think having a conversation about where would you like to serve? What do you like to do? And then slot them into that area on the board. Another, I think, important thing that we don't look at a lot, and I talked about it a little bit, is succession planning. And who will be our next leaders? Who are going to be on the board? I like to look at a board. Of course, Rotary has this pretty much, but I like to look at a third, a third, a third. So a third of your board is going to go off every year. 2/3 will stay on. And I like to look at, I have a grid that I use for nominating for other boards. And that grid will tell me women, men, ages, skill sets. And I really look at that board and also look at where is the organization. Are we building the organization? Are we at the peak of the organization? Are we coming down in terms of whether it's membership or activities? So really look at the life cycle of the organization and what it needs, and then look at who would be the best leaders for that board. And I know this is challenging because sometimes we don't have enough people to select from. But then what I might do is go out into the community and start looking for people and grooming them to come into Rotary to fill some of those slots. So again, the succession planning is incredibly, incredibly important for a successful board. Okay, next, please. Next slide. Thanks. Can't by time. So I always have an orientation for new board members. So why do you do that? Yes, you've already had in the spring, you've had your retreat and you've done your strategic planning, you've got your roadmap out there, but then an orientation coming on, especially some of the newer Rotarians, they may have only been in Rotary 2 or 3 years. So during that orientation, I would have a welcome, a history of the club, because so many people don't know the histories of their club, review the strategic plan, and also in your strategic plan, to make sure you're touching back to that plan at least 2 to 3 times a year. And the way I do that is I will have a red square, a green square, and a yellow square to demonstrate visually how we're moving forward with our strategic plan. Red means we're not doing very well. Yellow, we're kind of in the middle of it, and green means we've successfully completed that area. Club bylaws have already been spoken about, and that's really important to read the bylaws. And even better is when you have to rewrite, or not rewrite, edit your bylaws. So we're currently editing, I'm currently editing the foundation bylaws of our club. And they're really great because you see, when you look at the bylaws and the policies, you see, okay, the policies say one thing, but the bylaws say something completely different, and they must be in agreement with each other. So if you don't know your club bylaws, how are you going to know whether you're out of compliance with your bylaws? And I see that a lot. Again, your job descriptions and committees should be in that orientation. Your legal obligations of nonprofit boards should be in there, and that should be a piece of for discussion as well. Your annual budget and your committee expense reports, and this is really important. How are committees allowed by your club to expend their funds? Are they allowed to use it on food? You know, I mean, whatever your club is allowing, you need to really spell that out, because this is where clubs can get in a lot of trouble, where they don't know, and committee chairs don't know what they can spend their money on. And also, to that point, there should also be at the beginning of the year in your budgeting process, your committees should be given a sheet to fill out as to what is your budget and what are you going to use it on. So you can do your budgeting really effectively at the beginning of the year. The orientation should also include a schedule of meetings and events, all the dates for both the district as available and also your club. This really enables people to be prepared and make the time to be able to attend these events and trainings. A conflict of interest form needs to be signed annually by each member of the board. And I have those, I'm sure we all have those or can get them, but those need to be signed and saved. That's really, really important. And then I also like to have a mentor assigned to each board member, each new board member. And that really helps them get more engaged on the board and kind of helps them steer their own canoe to get through the board, being on the board for the first time. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I have 3 minutes and 4 seconds left. So I think that's my last slide, is it not? Yeah, okay. So I wanted to make sure that I'm going to be facilitating a chat, but I'm looking at the chat room. Oh, you all are so nice. What is a conflict of interest form? That's great. And so a conflict of interest is a form, it's a document that you would sign that would indicate if you have any for example, on the board, and you have any relationship with a company that's doing business with your club, you need to disclose that. And the conflict of interest form will allow you to disclose that, and then you keep that in your files. And also, if any business with that company comes up and you're on the board, you must recuse yourself or not vote in favor or not in favor of using that. So this is really, really important, and where I don't see a lot of Rotary clubs getting significantly in trouble with this, but you definitely could. If you're, for example, I'm using XYZ organization to, create my gala and my club. And guess what? I'm a part owner of XYZ Corporation. So that is a definite conflict of interest. I must recuse myself. Or if I have an auditor, for example, who's my nephew, and I suggest him to the club, but I don't tell the club that he's my nephew. That's really a definite conflict of interest, and you must disclose that before you vote and or use any of those folks. Is there a Rotary? We can get a Rotary template for a conflict of interest form. Rick, we can get that. Naomi, do you have one, or shall I give you one?
You can give us one.
Okay, so I have a number. I have 5 people in the chat who have not used them or not familiar with them, and this is critically important. I can tell you that we had a lot of self-dealing with a very, very large nonprofit, actually probably the largest nonprofit organization in Hawaii, and it became a point of international concern. So I'm sure that Dell will be talking about this, but we can get you a a conflict of interest form to sign. Yeah. Any other questions that I see in the, no more, I've never seen one. Okay. I got all those. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So I think I made my time. I have 14 seconds left. I'm trying, like I said, start on time, end on time.
Nancy, you did really great. So Nancy's the epitome of somebody who's like really organized. So that is awesome. So thank you so much, Nancy. Look at that. Nancy even had a little alarm there.
I do. I have my alarm. I apologize. It went off 1 second. I just will turn it off now. Oh boy.
Yeah, we got to remember that one as we're doing these trainings, because there's people like don't have that alarm. So that's cool.
It's on my phone. Everybody's got one on their phone.
Excellent. So one of the things we wanted to tell you, when we're done with Dell's presentation, which is coming up next, we're going to go into breakout rooms, and they're going to be 3 breakout rooms based on the size of the club that you're in. So large clubs are 30 people and above, medium-sized clubs, 18 people to 30 people, and then small clubs, 18 and smaller. And so we'll have a facilitator in each one of those breakout rooms. But the questions we're going to be addressing in those breakout rooms is, what are some of the obstacles that boards face to be really effective? And then what are going to be some of the best practices that we can come up with to help our clubs? So we're hoping to have that discussion when we come out of that. But without further ado, our next presenter, and always really like this guy because he gives us really great information in a really interesting way. Our past district governor and legal counsel for our district, past district governor, Mr. Dell Green. So Dell, take it away.
Okay, let's see if we can make this work. So far, so good. This
Yeah.
is kind of like a seamless web, because we began with responsibilities that Benson shared with us, and a couple of things he talked about. We're meeting regularly and knowing our club bylaws. And then, of course, in Nancy's section, she did introduce us to some things called the duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience. And we talked about the importance of attending meetings and knowing our club bylaws. All very important things. If I can get this thing to work for me. There we go. So we're going to talk about fiduciary duties, and this is basically the outline. We're going to go over what is a duty, what is a fiduciary, what is a duty, the basic types of duties, decision maker protections. I don't know if we'll have time for the hypotheticals because we're going into breakout rooms, but we'll see what happens. So a fiduciary, according to, I think this is Webster, it's a very old word, it originates from the 16th century, Latin word. The big takeaway for me is that the heart of a fiduciary is the concept of trust. It's a situation where somebody has reposed trust and confidence in another. It can be used either as a noun, and a noun, of course, is a person, place, or thing. So in the case of a fiduciary, it is what we would call the person who has that duty to act for another's benefit. That's when we use it as a noun, but it can also be used as an adjective, a describing word, and it describes that relationship of trust and confidence and reliance that one would have as a fiduciary. So we can use it in two different contexts, just kind of keep that in mind. So what is a fiduciary relation? Well, according to the Hawaii Supreme Court, it's a very broad concept, and it's said to exist in cases where influence has been acquired and abused, or where confidence has been reposed and betrayed. It also talks about saying that relief is granted. What does the court mean when it says a relief is granted? Anyone? The attorneys in the room? I know a couple of you are in there.
Somebody's going to pay some money or go to jail.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. That's right. When the court speaks like that, the court is basically saying that somebody, probably not jail in this particular instance, but probably money, as she said, and that would be the remedy in the event that somebody were to breach a duty, a fiduciary duty. So there are basically three types of duties, fiduciary duties. One is the duty of care, duty to act in good faith, duty of loyalty, to act in the best interest of the organization and free from conflicts of interest. And the last one is the duty of obedience, which is basically following the governing documents, which would be, for example, in your club, your constitution and bylaws. If you are a nonprofit organization like a foundation, some of our clubs have foundations, they'd be your articles of organization, articles of incorporation, because we're dealing with corporations, and then also our bylaws as well. So the duty of care, what is it? Well, it's acting in good faith in a manner that a reasonably prudent person would do, acting with ordinary care in a manner that you believe to be in the best interest of your organization. And how do we do that? Well, we're reasonably informed. So I think we heard earlier about attending meetings and understanding our bylaws and what have you. That's what we do to be reasonably informed. But decision makers are not necessarily guarantors for the organization. Just keep that in mind. I mean, one of the things I want to do is make you aware of the responsibilities, but not to scare you to the point where you're not willing to serve, because it shouldn't be that situation. It really does require some effort, but I think it's a reasonable amount of effort so that you can make decisions, reasonable decisions based on information that's available to you. And if you do, then you should be in good shape. So do you think this is acting in a reasonable manner, sticking your head in the sand? I would hazard to say no. That's not reading the bylaws. That's not attending meetings. That's not knowing what's going on in the organization. And if you're acting in that manner, well, you might be at some risk. So what do we do to fulfill our duty? Well, we act in good faith. We act with diligence and care and skill. We act in the best interest of the organization and not in our own personal interest. We attend and participate in meetings. We can rely on expert reports, but we shouldn't rely blindly. I mean, if it doesn't seem to make sense, it doesn't pass the smell test, you should be in a position where you should be asking questions. The duty of loyalty. This is a duty to act in the best interest of the organization, right? I think we heard quite a bit earlier about conflicts of interest and the like, and that's where this kind of comes up. It comes up in the context of the duty of loyalty, to act in the best interest of the organization, to not act in, to put one's own personal interests ahead of the organization. So, for example, if I have a fundraiser for the club, and maybe it's a clam bake, and I happen to sell the best clams in town, does that mean that, and I'm on the board, does that mean that the club's not able to deal with me because I have this conflict of interest? First of all, is that a conflict of interest? Probably, right? Because I'm selling the clams. Does that mean that the club's not able to deal with me? No. So what are the what do you think I must do so that the club would be able to deal with me? Because I might have the best clams in town, the best quality, the best price, what have you, and it would really be a disservice to the club if they weren't able to deal with me. And there are a lot of other things that our club members do when we're doing fundraisers and community service projects and things like that, where I think this situation, an analogous situation, would come up. So what do you think we would do? Anyone?
Disclose the conflict and not vote on whether to buy the clams.
Thank you very much. That's exactly right. So you would disclose the conflict. I think Nancy was talking about a conflict of interest disclosure, and that's something that a lot of nonprofits will do nowadays. They'll do that on an annual basis. But regardless of whether or not you sign a conflict of interest statement, you should always disclose conflicts, potential conflicts. When you're having to address something as part of a body that involves you. And the other thing to do also is to recuse yourself from the vote. Remember, who does the minutes in your meetings? It's probably the club secretary. When does that happen? Probably after the meeting. And then when do those minutes get approved? Well, maybe probably the next monthly meeting, probably, right? Is it important to review those minutes? Maybe to review those minutes and make sure that it reflects the fact that if you were present, that you recused yourself. Do you think that secretaries, and it's not because they do this stuff intentionally, it's just that maybe inadvertently failed to capture the fact that you had recused yourself? Is that what you think that would be important? Maybe this is just another one of those examples where it's kind of important maybe to read these minutes before we approve them. How many times have we gone to a board meeting and the president or chairperson, whoever's running the meeting, says, the minutes of the last meeting were disseminated on such and such a date. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? They'll pause for a second, say, hearing none, the minutes are approved as submitted. Maybe it's important to look at those minutes in advance and to make sure that it reflects what you've done. So what do we do in terms of the duty of loyalty? Well, we kind of touched upon this just a bit, making sure that we act in the best interest of the organization, we disclose our conflicts, we recuse ourselves, maintaining confidentiality, is also another important part of your duty of loyalty to the organization. And to all those who obey the law and get away with it, well, the duty of obedience, okay? This is a duty to make sure that the organization is abiding by its own charter, bylaws, articles, and what have you. And how do you do that? Well, as Benson and Nancy mentioned, reading the bylaws is a good start. So it really is kind of important. I know they're pretty boring sometimes, but it'll pay dividends. They're really not that long, so take some solace in that. It's not like you're reading War and Peace, hopefully, but it is an important document. So we're ensuring that the company or organization, your club, the district, what have you, is acting consistent with its own bylaws and constitution and what have you. So there is this thing called a breach of a fiduciary duty. It is a claim, a legal claim. And like a lot of claims that involve the breach of a duty, there are 4 basic elements. One is you have to have a duty. In this case, it's a fiduciary duty. It's determined by law. When you're dealing with fiduciaries from the standpoint of an attorney, it's kind of nice because these things are pretty well set out as to who owes a fiduciary duty to whom. You have to have a breach of that duty. And how do you breach the duty? Well, it's kind of things we were talking about before. Maybe you don't go to your meetings on a regular basis. Maybe you don't read the bylaws. Maybe you don't read the minutes of the meeting. You don't read the reports that are presented to you, and you just simply really don't do anything, and things kind of fall through the cracks. And that might be a breach. And if that breach causes damages, then there might be a claim. But thankfully for us, we have this thing called the business judgment rule, a rule that provides some liability protection in the event that a decision maker acts in the best interest of the organization, is acting with reasonable prudence, is attending meetings, is being reasonably informed. According to the Hawaii Supreme Court, the business judgment test is satisfied when the person acts on an informed basis, acts in good faith, and acts in an honest belief that the action taken was in the best interest of the organization. Just remember, when you're dealing with these kinds of decisions, just keep this in mind. WWRPPD, WWRPPD. What would a reasonable and prudent person do? Now, is this a reasonably prudent person? I don't know, you decide, but reasonably prudent person. Now, as Rotarians, I think we have a leg up because we have this thing called the 4-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? I mean, if we apply the 4-way test, what duty do you think is implicated? Is it the truth? Anyone? Are you shy? You guys are, it's a room full of Rotarians. I find that hard to believe. Well, how's about like the duty of care? Because is it the truth? You know, being reasonably informed, you know, fair to all concerned. Maybe it could be also the duty of care. Is it fair to all concerned? Are you acting in good faith? Maybe the duty of loyalty. You know, are you acting in the best interest of the entity? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Well, you know, if you're acting without conflict, is that acting with goodwill or trying to build goodwill? Now, these are things, they're not perfect in all ways in terms of applying the, meeting the basic requirements of a fiduciary, but I think they go a long ways. So keeping the 4-way test, these are things that, things that we think, say, or do ourselves, not so much for other people, but ourselves. But if we moderate ourselves and act in accordance with the 4-way test, I think that would bode us well. Now, in addition to the business judgment rule, there's some other things you can do to protect yourselves. If you have a nonprofit entity like a foundation, for example, the Nonprofit Corporation Act provides some immunity that provides the opportunity for indemnification. You can get insurance, but I think the most important thing you can do is be informed. If you're reasonably informed, you'll go a long ways toward avoiding problems down the road. And with that, I think we had some hypotheticals, but I'm just gonna maybe end it there because I know that you guys wanted to have some time for breakout. So I apologize, it's a lot in 15 minutes, but if there are any quick questions, I might be able to answer those before you go into breakout.
Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Thanks, Del. That was great. That's Del's sort of scared straight presentation for people that are haven't worked on boards before. So we are gonna go into breakout rooms right now. If you have questions for Del or Nancy or anyone, you can post them in the chat, and hopefully we can address them once we come back out of it. How we set it up, there's going to be 3 breakout rooms, and the breakout rooms are going to be based on club size. So breakout room number 1 will be large clubs, and that's going to be facilitated by Nancy Pace. And so large clubs, as we said, are 30 members and above. So hopefully you know that. You know what size your club is. A medium club is 18 to 30, and that's going to be facilitated by Sandy. And then small clubs, which is 18 and below, is going to be facilitated by Naomi. So I set this thing up so that everybody could sort of self-select the club that they're in. But if you guys, and I've been in Zoom meetings for a long time, you know that sometimes it doesn't work. So if it doesn't work and you're not assigned to a club, if you could just hang tight and stay in the room, and then I will put you in a club based on your club size when it's over. So I'm going to open this up now, and so you should see 3 club selections on your page, and you can choose one of them to go to. So if you don't see that, then let me know. Then I'll have to like recreate it and do it all over again. Okay. So Naomi, I think you'll have to, because you're a host, I couldn't actually put you in a club. So you'll have to go into the small club on your own. So I see people disappearing, so I'm thinking that it's working. So if it isn't working for you, then stay in the room, and I will put you somewhere. I mean, that's not a threat. It's just like, I'll take care of you. Now, if you don't know what size your club is, if you could just shout it out or put it in the chat, then we can put you in the right place. Thanks everybody for doing the breakouts. I know those are always really effective, and somebody's going to say, we didn't have enough time, so I'll just say it for you. I know you didn't have enough time. So great. So we had 3 groups out there, a large group facilitated by Nancy. So Nancy, who's going to be your reporter for that, for your group?
I am. This is
Gwen.
Gwen. Yes.
Oh, Gwen. Good. All right, Gwen. Gwen's
Okay.
always a reporter. We like that.
So I'm going to share the obstacles first, and then we can talk about some of the best practices to it. So the first one was, board members during board meetings, sometimes there are side conversations that goes off track that leads the meetings, not often, but sometimes, to go longer than was scheduled. And what happens with this is the unintended consequences is people then don't want to come to meetings because it stretches longer than it should, and then it becomes boring. The second one was, Zoom can sometimes also be a challenge, having that type of meeting venue. The other one is not everyone feels comfortable speaking. And so sometimes in meetings, there are those who speak often and those who hardly share at all. We're busy people. And so, sometimes it's hard to get to our board responsibilities, trying to just do our regular workday. And the last one we got to, not enough time, but sometimes we want to do it all ourselves, and we forget to share the opportunity to have other people help us so that they can also learn and mentor them. We did go through some of the best practices, especially on the first one. I can share that. Is that how you want to do it, Vincent?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Go
Okay.
for it.
So, meetings that go longer or have side conversations, really good best practices, having a norms of behavior, as Nancy mentioned, sometimes other people call it terms of engagement. You list it on a flip chart, and it's a reminder there, no side conversations, and, any other rules of engagement that you have. Also facilitation. I think Alan brought up a good point. A good meeting is run well with a very good facilitator. And so Benson, Naomi, maybe having a facilitation training might be something that is worthwhile for all. And there was another one that said that, hey, maybe sometimes your president might be a little bit shy or less assertive. And so maybe having a PE or another person run the meetings can help in that regard too.
Okay, great. Boy, you were paying attention. That's awesome. Okay, thanks, Gwen. Okay, DG Sandy, who was facilitator for your group or the recorder?
That would be none other than Barry Harris from the Rotary Club of Kaneohe.
Barry's always at it. Barry, go for it.
Thank you, Sandy. Thanks, Vincent. We talked a little bit about trying to find the people to serve, being that our clubs are a little smaller. We talked about the overall bylaws for Rotary, which is that case, there are about 15 people who are suggested to be on the board. For us, as a smaller club, that's not feasible for us. But PDG Dale Green explained to us that bylaws are flexible, and the clubs can change those bylaws to fit their specific club, which most clubs have done to be able to allow for consistent participation on the board and making sure that they can get those quorums. So that was good information, particularly for me. The other thing that we talked about was mentoring potential leaders in the club. Some of the older members, or I shouldn't say older, I'm sorry, some of the seasoned members of the club, looking out, I think it was mentioned earlier about succession planning and finding those people to mentor and get them ready to potentially serve in the future as a part of the board or as president or whatever the case may be, committee members, and taking those opportunities to bring those people in, having them feel more comfortable to become more a part of the club and feel comfortable in those positions. That kind of led to Rick mentioning having new members that come into your club, putting them to work immediately, not in a negative way, but making them feel comfortable, making them feel a part of the club. I explained that that's kind of what happened to me. I'm someone who generally kind of sits back and, takes the lay of the land and try to understand the culture of the club. But the members in Kaneohe, when I transferred there, they were really good about bringing me in, putting me on member committees, not in a very large sense, not to scare me away, but just enough to make me feel comfortable and feel a part of the club and that I was contributing to the club, which worked great for me, and I was appreciative of those opportunities. Gladys also mentioned communication being key. Constant communication, a lot of times email, phone calls, whatever the case may be, to talk about what's happening, what's coming up, things that we need to do, meetings that may be going on, making sure that the communication is getting out there, particularly in this day and age that we're living, not being able to meet in person or see people in person. That becomes critical in ensuring that the board meets and the club continues to function and thrive. So those were some of the main things. Sandy or other group members, if I missed anything, please chime in.
I just want to add one strategy that Barry didn't mention that he was a victim of, no, not a victim of, a lucky recipient of, is that a couple of the club members took him out to play golf. And I think that's where these conversations took place, and he was gently nudged, so to speak, to take part. Good sport. Thank you, Barry. We had a really good discussion. Any other comments from the group?
That was great. Sandy, thanks for facilitating that group. And we always really get good comments, really good comments from your group, and especially, our guys that are out there in the field. So Naomi, who's going to be the reporter for your group?
I was taking notes on our discussion, and Sandy, when you're in business, a lot of the deals are made on the golf course. So that is a one-time because you're stuck with that person for like 3 or 4 hours, and you can really get to know that person well. So for the smaller clubs, the biggest problem is membership. And if you don't have enough members, people are dying, leaving, and you don't have replacements, then you don't have an effective board. So we talked about how to get new members, and we're looking at rebranding clubs, looking at the culture of a club. Keeping the culture, the identity of a club is important. Getting corporate members, networking, doing projects with youth service, community service projects will make connections. Just asking people that you see to join is one thing. And so Nalani said we should be leading, board members should lead by example and bring in new members. So Sandy's goal, the Rotary International's goal is each one bring one. And so board members can lead by example. So for new members, talk to people, to get new members, talk to people, include them, engage them, look for community groups in your area, ask family members and kids to join you on projects, because a lot of times dedicated Rotarians are kids of Rotarians. So let's develop the next generation of Rotarians by bringing in friends and family. Okay, anything, did I miss anything? Nalani, Alan, Ralph?
I think that pretty much touched on everything.
Good, Naomi.
Thanks.
All right. Hey, nice job. So we have actually a couple of more minutes before I'm going to turn it over to Naomi for our last section. She's going to talk about succession planning. So while we still have Dell on the call and Nancy on the call, do we want to go back and ask any questions of them while they're here? Any questions about anything else? Okay.
Hey,
Benson, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want it to get away from me. So it's more administrative stuff. When I got involved with the Constitution and bylaws, they were told to us that we can adopt the Constitution as presented by RI, and we had the liberty to revise the bylaws to suit our needs. Is that still the way it is, or has things changed? Because I've heard some people say they're going to revise the Constitution, and I said, I don't think you can do that.
Dell, you want to take that one?
Sure. Alan, your understanding is correct. The Constitution is standardized and it applies to all clubs. The bylaws can be tailored. RI will, from time to time, amend the standard Constitution, but it's not permissible for us as clubs to amend.
Okay, great. And the second question is, we're trying to define the board. Initially, the board constituted of the officers and the committee chairs of the avenues of service. But we found that the board decision-making was enhanced by having some of the other committee chairs be considered board members. I wanted to know, and that can go down to any committee. And so is there some kind of a guideline that's provided on what would constitute a Rotary Club board?
I'd like to chime in too. That picks up on mine. When I look at my board, it says directors, then service chairs. And I'm a bit confused about, because there seems to be some that are directors and some service chairs, and I can't figure out, just picking up exactly what Alan said, how do you figure out who's what or how is that on the board? I agree, I'm not clear.
So in response to Alan's question, I would say that the standard or the proposed bylaws would be where I would start in terms of what most clubs would probably look to decide how they would define their board positions. But beyond that, then you would tailor it to your own specific needs.
So we can
Sounds
add
like a lawyer's answer.
Let's go ahead, Alan.
So we can add chairs of committees that we feel would be good to have on the board. I mean, we can do that, right? I mean, that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So.
The answer is yes. The answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as a comment, I just wanted to add that it would be good for the board to present their activities and decisions to the club in general. after each board meeting. I think that's a very important part of the board's responsibilities. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, Alan. So just as something that happened in reality when I was the PE of our club, and our president at that time, Brenda Ho, wanted me to relook at our bylaws. They actually rewrote the bylaws to include all the committee chairs. So our board went from 6 people to 13 people, like in 1 year. And so that's possible within the bylaws. So, okay, hey, great questions. This is super engaging. So
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Del, that I put
Oh,
out
yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
and he, Del, a great job, mentioned the 4-way test, and I love the 4-way test. I think it's great. I notice as a Rotarian for many, many years, I don't know how many meetings I've been to. I think it's probably above 1,000 and probably several hundred outside the United States. But District 5000 clubs seem to have the same agenda, ending with the 4-way test. I just wondered, is that just more of a tradition? Is that required? How does doing birthdays, anniversaries, announcements, and 4-way test? It seems like every club does that same agenda. Is that just a D5000 thing? What's that all about, Del?
That I would say is a D5000 thing. I think what happens is that we learn from our parents and in terms of clubs. And so the clubs that spawn us, we generally follow with their traditions, and that's how they get passed from club to club. But I will say that within our district, some clubs actually begin the club meeting with the 4-way test, and then a lot of them will end with the 4-way test. And then there are some clubs that don't even do the 4-way test. So it's not a requirement, it's just a tradition.
Okay, great. And what about that agenda format? Is that something that's just kind of passed down and encouraged, or is that up to the board, the president? What's with that agenda?
The agenda is up to the presiding officer, which would generally be the president. And oftentimes they'll get that at PETS, and then it just gets passed on from year to year to year. But it's not like it's cast in stone. There is room for that to be modified as long as you get your business done.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks, Kimo. Appreciate that. So our last presentation of the day will be with Naomi, and she's going to talk about club succession. So I'll turn it over to Naomi.
Thank you. So we're going to be talking about succession planning, and right now is when we should be thinking of this because our elections are coming up in December. So the governing body is the board, and we are governed by the Constitution and bylaws. So according to the Constitution, the officers and directors and committees are the governing board. And the authority is the board to control what's happening with the club. So when you have a vacancy, if it's during the current year, the board can make the decision on the replacement. If it's an incoming board, it would be the incoming board that makes the decision on any replacement. But the board action is final unless it's appealed by the club. Okay, so the elections, and you would go by your club's Constitution and bylaws, but normally you would form a nominating committee in October. In November, 30 days before you have your annual meeting. So now you need to plan when you're going to have your annual meeting. And December, sometimes you only have 2 meetings. So you really need to make sure when that meeting is going to be for your club elections. 30 days before that, you call you have a notice of the annual meeting. And then in December, before December 31st, you have your election of officers. So the club constitution, and this is from the recommended Rotary Constitution, it's held before December 31st, and you're going to elect your officers who take effect the next Rotary year starting July 1st. Okay, so you want to give reasonable notice to your club members about the annual meeting. The election you start with a nominating committee because you want to take a look at what you've got, who's coming off the board, who's going to be renewing, and what skills do you need? What new blood do you need, if any, on your board? So your options are, some clubs have the PE form the committee and pick the slate. Sometimes it's it is executive committee or a board. And sometimes in several clubs, they have the 3 past presidents who are on the nominating committee because they know the skills of the members. Okay, so you have the nominating committee, and then you have your election. So the election could be by ballot, it could be by show of hands, but it's the majority of the people there that will decide who the officers and board members are. Okay, so when you have the club board, according to the bylaws, the governing body of the club is these required positions: the president, immediate past president, president-elect, vice president, and a secretary. Those are required to be on your board. Okay, sometimes you have the PE or the immediate past president, or even a club trainer. That person can be the vice president. Then you can add other members that you want, a treasurer, a sergeant at arms, a president nominee, your avenues of service, your club chairs. You can add whatever you want, but remember that the bigger your board, the harder it is to make quorum. So sometimes you have an executive board that makes the decisions. Sometimes you want to keep the board up a certain amount, and then you had an advisory council. Okay, the terms of office. So other than the president is 1 year, and the president or the person will keep that position until a successor is elected or qualified, if that person agrees to stay on board. The president, the term of the president is actually 18 months because they're elected in December to take office a year and a half later. So in this December, you're electing a president-elect who is the president-elect starting July, and then they take office July of the following year as president. Okay. Qualifications of a president. And sometimes it's hard to follow this, but you want your president to have at least 1 year before being nominated. And they need to, the president-elect needs to attend PETS, training assembly, which is in the spring, unless they have unless they're excused and they have a replacement. Okay, but these are required things that they need to do. Rotary has this structure of committees. Okay, so in your board, you could have just 5 people, and the 5 people would be heads of a committee. And so these are just a suggestion. If you wanted to have your board, you have 1 person for club administration. Under that person, they would have committees for, like the speakers bureau, socials, engagement of the club members, club programs, setting up clubs, club meetings. Then you have membership. And so membership would be attraction, engagement, new member orientation, diversity, then public image, service projects, and foundation. So under these committee chairs, they would have subcommittees. And we really would recommend that every committee have at least 5 people so that you have the depth and breadth or bandwidth of people that can be trained, continuity, and you can see who is doing a good job for future leaders. So the 4 elements of a good and effective club is to sustain and grow memberships, to do successful projects, to support foundation and develop leaders. So if we think about these as goals of what an effective club is, the board can look at the committees that they have and the people who they have. So, the board, it's like a team. Okay, so, what team is this? Okay, so for this team, they're hooking
the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, and what they're not always at the Super Bowl. They're not always doing a good job, right? And it depends on who's on the team. But the loyalty of the fans is because they love the team. So just like Rotary, you have the loyalty of Rotarians because you love what Rotary does. But for the board to band together with the club members, thick and thin, through bad and good times, working together is the goal of that leadership group. Okay, so when you have a team that works together, you celebrate the successes together. So how do you develop the future leaders? Okay, so this is a process that may take time to do, okay, but you're going to identify potential leaders. Okay, who do you need? And we talked about membership, how to bring in new members, but step back and look at the composition of your board, of your club. Who do you need to bring in to bring the skills to the board or to the committees? So get members involved as soon as possible so you can see how they're working out. Get them involved because that's how you can get them engaged. Raise their Rotary IQ. Okay, so somebody wants to see the screen again. Okay, so this is the, I hope this is the Dallas. Oh, it's not the cow. Yeah, it is Cowboys. Okay, so I hope this image is in your head so that you're looking at how your team can celebrate successes.
It's the stars on the helmets. It's the Lone Star State. So that's how you can tell.
Okay. But you want people engaged on committees, you want to raise their IQ. So your team members, they have to practice. And that is raising your IQ by coming to these webinars, by taking courses on the Learning Center. That's how you get better, is you raise that Rotary IQ. And the communication, if you don't have the communication, then how do you have this success? How do you work as a team if you don't communicate on what the plan is, on where people need to be? And every single one of these people have a different job, right? They have a different area of the field to defend their quarterback. So that's how your board and your club committees work. They each have their own thing to do, but they're all working together for the vision, the common goal. So having that common vision is a good thing. Building relationships so that you can collaborate and work together. And then looking for new ideas, because in order to have a new play, you need to look for how you need to adapt to the other team, how you need to adapt to the different things that you have. So those elements of a successful club is having people who are engaged, raising your IQ, communication, having a vision, building those relationships for collaboration, and having new ideas and adapting. So training, we have the webinars, we have the Kuleana Leadership 101 webinars, spring training. Everybody's spring training assembly is where we can train the incoming board on what they need to do. So that's going to help you, the board, get that continuity, get everyone trained up. Okay, and then read the, okay, this is Benson's thing, read the Rotary magazine. And then I'm adding, we have Rotary newsletters. So we have specific newsletters on topics like youth service and public image. So subscribe to those magazines so that you can get more information about what you need to do. So the succession planning is take a human inventory of what you've got, what skills you have, what potential people have, assess the board's weakness, strengths, what you need to do, who do you need to bring in, look at diversity, equity, inclusion, who are you missing? Does your club and board reflect your community? What are the threats? Maybe you're losing your location, funding sources, you don't have a fundraiser, changing demographics, and develop a strategy. And that's where the Vibrant Club workshop is going to help with developing that strategy. So thank you very much, everybody, for all that you do. Back to you, Benson.
Okay, well, hey, thankfully we're right on time, and we're finishing right on time. So I want to close this session by first thanking you guys for all spending your time being here. I was reminded in the chat by our Spirit of Aloha officer, Lila Berg, to try to wind it up on something that reminds us that we're in Hawaii and that these relationships are really important. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of things real quick. So one of the things that Lila's been trying to get everybody to do is to say aloha when you start your email and say mahalo at the end. So I'm going to teach you a little word that you can add on to mahalo. And that word is piha, P-I-H-A, easy, P-I-H-A. And piha means full. Like my grandma used to say that when she eat too much, piha, piha wai. So, but you can say that by, you can use that term on the end of your mahalo piha, which is I'm full of aloha, I'm grateful. And so any Native Hawaiian knows that, mahalo piha. And then the last thing I want to leave you guys with is this. So if you go to a big Hawaiian function, there's always people that are, the person that says the grace, they'll go e puli kako, right? You guys know that. So let's all come and say the grace. So easy one to remember, and the reason why we're all here today is e kokua kako. Let us all help. And that's the reason why you spend your Saturday here. That's the reason why that you're in Rotary. That's the reason why you feel like, hey, this is something bigger than me, and then I want to reach out and help my community. It's because you have that e kokua kako. So that's our presentation for today. We recorded it. Thank God for Naomi who presses the button. And so it'll be available for those of your club members who weren't able to attend today. It'll be available on the district website, usually probably by Monday. And this is, remember, only session 1 of 4 sessions, so that by the end of the year, not only are we trying to engage the board more, but also getting set up so that boards in the future can be more effective. So I want to thank our presenters today, Nancy and Del Green and Naomi, and to all of you guys who participated in the breakouts. So have a great Saturday up here in Hilo. Hey, I see some sun, and that's a big thing in Hilo. So we're gonna go out and enjoy that. I see all the Hilo people going, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it's raining here in Hawaii Kai. I'm getting a little bit of rain, so.
Yeah, usually we're the ones getting the rain in Hilo, but today,
Yeah, that's all right.
we gotta go beach today. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Appreciate you guys coming tonight.
Aloha,
Aloha, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it was
Aloha.
great. Very helpful.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah, aloha.
Oh, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Benson. You don't never need to give me any attention to that, but thank you.
Oh, I know, but
Yeah,
but
I love all these.
I
love
appreciate
these
you bringing it.
handouts.
Yeah,
I
we
have to take.
stuff, and they'll all be available to you, Adrian, if you need them. So thanks, Naomi, for putting all that effort into putting that all together. And Alan, thanks for always asking the good questions. So we like that.
Yeah, it's helpful to be reminded about this over and over again. Lila, are you president-elect of what club?
Rotary Club of Honolulu.
Oh, the big one.
One of them.
The biggie one. You still meeting at the Royal?
No, we're in discussions. They're not open right now. So
yeah,
the transition time. Thank you,
yeah,
Adrian.
it's a real challenge. I mean, because we're on Zoom, and then we were at this Hawaii Prince, but the room was really horrible.
Let's end on a positive note. We'll find the way.
Yeah, that's true. We'll keep that thought in mind. Yeah. Okay.